one message that Christ has died to set us free. We'll tell the nations this true love story of Christ's forgiveness. Just believe. Receive it today. Receive it today. The good news of Christ Jesus. Receive it, I pray. Despite all your past, you can start again right now. Forgiveness is available to all. Receive it today. Receive it, I pray. The good news of Christ Jesus. Receive it today. Despite all your past, you can start again right now. Forgiveness is available to all through Christ.
What's up? God bless. God bless. Good to see everybody on the live stream.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Faith the Nation. My name is Jonathan, joined here with Deacon Alex Estrada.
Amen. Amen. Good to see you, Brother Jonathan. And good to see everybody on the live stream today. Starting at the very top, I see Pablo Jr. in the house.
What's up, Pablo?
Along with Kathy H. She says, God bless everybody. God bless
Yes.
America. Good to see
Yeah.
Church of Jesus Christ in the
Church of
house.
Jesus Christ.
Also, been faithful coming on. He says
Right.
that Tim
We see-
Walz is more presidential than Kamala. Kamala. I probably have to agree with that one. Also, Mingo Milo, stay tuned TV. I like that MAGA right there. Make America godly again. Let us know where you guys are watching from. Be sure to drop a like hit that like button. Make
Brother,
sure to comment. Yes, sir.
I like that. That's like a different kind of MAGA. That's Make America Godly Again. Praise the Lord.
You know what? A little story about that MAGA, Make America Godly Again. I actually had a patch made when I was living in New York City. That it was red and it had the MAGA, but it was Make America Godly Again. So,
Bro,
one in spirit, but stay tuned.
Dude, I was only aware of Make America Born Again. I didn't know about Make America Godly Again.
That's right. Yep. I see Sister Taylor in the house. God bless you, Sister Taylor. Good to see you, sister. We've got Hypostatic Union. I know what that U stands for. Praise the Lord. I like that. And he says, God bless.
Brother, are you like a chemistry major or is this a theological?
That's theological. So that's basically talking about the hypostatic union with Christ as being fully God, fully man. And so that's what that's about. And then we see Brother Farmer Scott. Good to see Brother Farmer Scott. I spent a little bit of time with him up in New York City, or upstate New York, I should say, this past weekend at the men's conference. It was a blessed time. Good to see you on, Brother Scott. And Sister Stephanie Estrada.
Stephanie Estrada.
Shalom, she says.
Shalom, brethren. Back to you, sister.
Yes. Amen. That's Mrs. Deacon.
That's right. That's
Amen.
right. Low key or high key.
Yeah.
High key.
Amen. Well, just want to say, I wish I could say hello to everybody, but God bless you guys. Make sure you guys drop a comment. Let us know where you guys are watching from. We just want to welcome everybody to Faith the Nation, where we dive into current events, news, politics, and we give you our biblical eyes. We put our biblical eyes on it, spiritual eyes, and reveal things that maybe the regular news people are not letting you know about. Okay, today I'm excited, Brother Jonathan. What do we got today?
Well, brother, real quick, I hope you're talking about biblical lenses and figuring things out. I hope the audience didn't figure out that I wasn't wearing my microphone. It was like over on the counter somewhere. Can you hear me now? Like, I don't know how you heard me before. It's
It's
got to
much
be a
better.
million times better now.
Yeah, it sounds really good.
Oh, wow. Well, saints of God, we're hooked up tonight with a real microphone. It's amazing. We're progressing. Um, yeah, we have an amazing show today, of course. The news of the day. There's a lot of breaking news stories, but the subject matter here today is the vice presidential debate. That is what is going on today, the vice presidential debate between Tim Walz, who is Kamala Harris's running mate, and JD Vance, which is Donald Trump's running mate.
Right.
We're going to talk about the candidates a little bit before we get into the vice presidential talk. Matter of fact, let me back up a little bit. So first, we're going to cover some breaking news because there is breaking news that is happening today. There's several things we need to bring up. After the breaking news, we're going to talk a little bit about JD Vance and Tim Walz as far as their positions, highlights, lowlights. We're going to quickly power through that. And then we're going to get into what Deacon Alex and I think about the debate tonight, like what we think needs to happen, what we think is going to happen, what we think matters. So, brother, before, actually, excuse me, I forgot. We're covering the current events first. So, brother, which one did you want to talk about first? Because there's a lot of breaking news out there today.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think we probably need to go ahead and just discuss a little bit about what's going on in North Carolina and in the southern states of Georgia, Tennessee. You know, obviously with Hurricane Helene, I believe it's Hurricane Helene. There's a lot that's been going on that I think a lot of times people, you know, we just don't see too much about it. We don't hear about it. But I mean, you know, if you haven't seen or heard about it, I think you've been living under a rock, unfortunately. But you know, there's been. I think it's important to note that there's a lot of devastation that has taken place with the hurricane. And so I'm going to share my screen with you guys so you guys can see this. Um, and so these are some of the footages that have been coming out where there's just been total devastation with the hurricane. Roads are closed. A lot of homes were flooded rapidly. And I think they're already counting close to 130 people that are already counted as dead. I mean, this is just horrendous news. It's an unfortunate event. And, you know, places like Tennessee, North Carolina, Georgia, they need our prayers. They need our support. There has been breaking news that has come out that people are still being found alive. And so we want to pray for all the rescue efforts. But it's just been a tragic event. And, you know, we just need to be in prayer. And if we can help somehow, you know, we should try to reach out. You know, if you know anybody in the area, it's just been total devastation and many lives have been lost. And there's still, I'm wanting to say, I think I read something like hundreds of people that are still missing. And so it's just very, very sad news. And obviously it's unfortunate. And, you know, we just, as a church, we just got to continue to pray for as many survivors as possible. So I did want to talk a little bit about that. You know, I was up in New York City. The hurricane came through Florida. Florida obviously took a little bit of the force of the wind, but it was really the water that really did most of the damage. A lot of the flooding went into the dams. Some dams broke, and when the dam breaks, I mean, you're just getting millions and millions of gallons of water that are just rushing through these ravines and these towns. and yeah, so it's just been a pretty devastating event that I just wanted to bring to light. If anybody on this live stream on the channel just hasn't been paying attention, but it's been pretty devastating. So that's number one. The second thing that I wanted to cover is right now. I started last night at midnight.
Brother,
Go ahead.
real quick. So sorry.
That's okay.
I wanted to add something to what you just said because the the FEMA, is that how you say it?
Yep.
FEMA. So just one little tidbit. There is a, let me see if this just came. So June 13th, 2024, this was last updated. There is a goal of FEMA, and it's known as goal number one. And goal number one, I wish I could share this with you, what I'm looking at is to instill equity as a foundation of emergency management. So in other words, if you have a little more melanin in your skin, you may be more eligible for help than somebody else. So that's a very strange priority for FEMA to have as far as disaster relief goes. I just wanted to point that out. Sorry, brother.
Yeah, no, that's okay. The second thing that I wanted to talk about was this happened last night at about midnight. I don't know, you guys can see that, right? So basically, it's the ports all the way from Maine all the way down to Texas. That's covering the Atlantic and the Gulf coasts. Okay, all the ports have gone on strike. This is 45,000 U.S. port workers have officially gone on strike. As I said, all the way from Maine to Texas. This is the first time that a port strike has taken place since 1977.
Wow.
Now, why is this important? Well, I don't have to tell you, this is where most of the goods that come into the country that come from exports from other countries are coming into the ports, and the workers have officially gone on strike. What this is going to cause, depending on how long the strike goes on, we can see massive shortages in our stores, anywhere from clothing, electronics, which electronics may not sound like that bad of a thing, but think about it. We use electronics in everyday things. Chips. What I'm talking about is like electronic chips that are going to go into our cell phones and you name it, everything else. It's also going to cause shortages even in some food supplies. I know that sounds crazy. Why should it cause shortages in our food supplies when we should be getting our food here? But you'd be surprised how much food comes in from other places. And so our stores are probably going to start seeing shelves that are empty, from cleaning supplies, toiletries, a whole lot of stuff. My and so yeah, you want to jump in there?
I just want to jump in there. Yeah, you know what you're saying about the different things that are going to possibly be affected, I think is so important to highlight because, when you hear about a strike happening, I don't know. I know me personally, the first thing I think of is like, what does that, have to do with me? And that sounds far away. These strike workers are striking somewhere else. Like, what is it? But just like you're saying, brother Alex, this. The implications of this strike is billions of dollars,
A
and
day.
right, and it comes at such a time too, brother
Yeah.
Alex. I I,
Yeah.
I wonder I wonder if they're uh, if our audience is aware that the timing of this is very suspect because the union workers know that Joe Biden is very pro-union. They also know that this election, we're in election season. The presidential election is happening in nearly 30 days. And so what appears to be happening is the unions realize that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris specifically Kamala Harris, need the vote of the union workers. So if they push for some heavy, pay us 70, I think I saw 70%, they were requesting like 70% more pay and, different things like that. I think if we look at those different moving parts, like where we're at the election season, they need the union workers' vote. It seems like they might be doing this to put pressure on them to cave to their demands, knowing that they need to keep their vote. And I just also want to point out for our viewers out there, the president of the United States does have the ability to forestall this strike. The president does have the ability to forestall this strike for about 5 months. There's a kind of, I don't remember if it's called a clause or something, but he has that power to do that. And the whole point of it is so that it gives the economy and everybody, all parties involved, time to discuss and negotiate. So the president has that power, but will he use it? Will they use the power? It seems like they won't use the power, because if they do that, the unions might get mad and say, well, we won't vote for you. So there's a whole thing going on, brother.
Right. Yeah. And it's kind of, on the side of Kamala, it's kind of a conundrum, because it's a darned if you do, darned if you don't situation. Because if they don't do anything, what is that going to entail? Well, it's going to cause food shortages. It's going to cause supply shortages that everybody's going to feel. In addition to that, if they if they if they do enforce that power, that enactment, then the unions are going to be possibly not voting for them. But then at the same time, who do they hurt? Pick your poison. Do they appeal to the union and try to keep their vote, or do they make the people of the United States, do they make them hurt and try to outlast and just sneak into the White House? And it seems like that's kind of the plan is, let's just try to get as many votes as we can. Let's try to divert through media and try to divert the masses, and hopefully they won't blame us and try to just sneak in, and then we'll deal with it when as long as we're in power. But, and so they're basically playing, a game of Russian roulette with the United States,
Yeah.
and so but it's not a good situation any way around it.
And brother, I think even though it would help the Biden-Harris administration politically, I don't care. I think they should absolutely use that presidential power to forestall this strike. It would be the right thing to do for the American people, and of course, I would encourage them to do it regardless of
Right.
the politics involved. That's a good thing for the country. It's a good thing for our brothers and sisters. It's a good thing for everybody to forestall this, because this happening right now is a big problem.
Yeah, well, the Bible says a man that does not work will not eat, and this is gonna, if you got a lot of people that are not working, a lot of people are not eating. Now, obviously, I know that's typically that scripture should be applied to the individual that is lazy, but in this case, you got 45,000 people that work at the ports, and what they are going to do could possibly affect, by them not working, could possibly affect how other people eat in this nation. And I agree with you 100%. I think the president should get in and enact that ability that he has to delay this strike, and in hopes that they can come to some kind of an agreement. But one thing I want to say is that I don't think that it's all just money that they're after. I think what's happening is the union workers, and I've been hearing through the grapevine that there's a possibility of the reason for their strike is actually to fight against the use of AI. Okay, because AI is beginning to come in and be able to take people's jobs away when you can just have robots. I mean, you can look at how China does their port work, and you've literally got young, a bunch of, not that many, but young people behind a bunch of screens, and it's almost like they're playing video games, and they're moving the ports, and they're moving all the containers, and they're shipping everything, and everything is done now almost with robotics in China. And so there could be some of that element that could be entailed in this strike as well.
Yes, brother. And speaking of strikes, I think that brings us to the next piece of breaking news that has happened today. It's not so breaking because it's already happened, but
Right.
the news is that Iran has launched over 100 missiles I believe it's 200 missiles at Israel. They shot hundreds of missiles, and by the grace of God, um, as I currently, the information that I currently have suggests that no people have, or I should say, no Israelis have been killed by the missile strikes. And the reason I say no Israelis is because, ironically, brother, the one person that was killed from these missile strikes was actually a Palestinian who I believe was either sneaking from southern Lebanon into where's
Tel Aviv.
the
Tel Aviv.
no into, oh my gosh, where's the war happening with Hamas in
Gaza.
Gaza? I'm sorry. So it was either somebody coming into Gaza or leaving Gaza, and it was a Palestinian. So the one person that died was actually a Palestinian person. But unfortunately, saints of God, there were casualties, but those casualties were from terrorists that came on the ground. They had rifles. Right as the missiles were falling, these guys came out with rifles, two guys, and they started shooting people at the same time. Seems like a very clear coordinated attack from Iran, telling people, hey, go out and do the shooting at this time. 7 people so far have been confirmed to have died from this unfortunate and tragic attack.
Yeah.
Yeah, brother. Do you have anything to say about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Here's the thing, man. This, some people are saying that this is possibly the beginning of World War III, and I 100% disagree with that, because World War III, if anything, it started on October 7th. That's what, if this does lead into that, if what we are seeing is the beginning of that, people are going to look back and they're going to say it was October 7th, which actually today is October 1st. We're almost at the 1 year mark. Today was something that was kind of a little bit something on my heart to kind of share about, is that October 1st last year, me and 2 other brothers actually got back from Israel last year on this day, and so it hits a little close to home, being that we were there right before October 7th happened. And one thing I want to mention is the reason for this attack on Israel is because Israel has been taking out the leaders of Hamas. They've been taking out the leaders of Hezbollah, and they have been attacking Hezbollah in an unprecedented way with the using of electronics, coming in and planting explosives on communication devices that were ordered by Hezbollah, which is unheard of in modern warfare. That thousands of pagers went off all at the same time just a couple weeks ago, and then the very next day, thousands of walkie talkies blew up all at the same time, killing hundreds of Hezbollah terror agents and injuring thousands of them. And then, not to mention, taking out their top leader, Hassan Nasrallah, who
Hmm.
was the top head commander of Hezbollah. And
Yeah.
so this strike that is coming on Israel it's also a conundrum for Iran. Iran is the one who feeds Hamas, who feeds Hezbollah, who feeds the Houthis, and all these little proxies that are shooting missiles and rockets at Israel daily. And so, what is Israel supposed to do? I mean, they have the right to defend themselves.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, obviously, we can get into a debate on every little detail about this war, but
Sure.
I'll say this because that's for a whole nother discussion and a topic and a time. But if they wanted a ceasefire, they had one on October 6th. There was a ceasefire on October 6th. October 7th, Hamas struck. The ceasefire ended. October 8th, that's when Hezbollah started shooting off rockets, and it's all funded by Iran.
And brother, I just want to remind the viewers the slogan of these people, of Hezbollah, of the Houthis, of these terrorists, they're all pretty much the same, and it's death to the Jews and death to America. They hate America. They hate the Jews. They think that the Jews should not exist. The Israel should not. They want to wipe it off the map. It's in their slogans. It's in their sayings. You know, they say quite often the quiet part out loud. If you look, go and look at what they say. So yeah, brother, these are dark moments in this warfare. War is never it's never a nice thing. It's a horrible thing, and I think the best thing when something like this happens is you finish it fast. You hit back hard. You finish it fast, and you don't drag it on. And unfortunately, there has been a lot of dragging, and I know that's a whole discussion that can be had, and it's fair play to have that discussion, saints of God. We're not
Yeah,
saying some of
right,
these things. That is my opinion, and I'm happy to discuss it and
right.
have a discussion about it because some of these things warrant a discussion, quite
Yeah,
frankly. So, but I just want to move on because something else, saints of God, of course, that warrants discussion is the discussion tonight. J.D. Vance and Tim Walz are going to be duking it out. The question is, who is going to land? If anyone, is anyone going to land a knockout punch tonight? We
right.
don't know. It's possible. With the election being so close, brother, normally I've heard that vice presidential elections are not that consequential when it comes to an election. But apparently, we're in a dead heat here, according to the sources. Now, I know, brother, between you and me, and we think that Trump voters are being undersampled. He
Of
seems to
course.
be doing really strong with male men, and I think the Hispanic vote. Like, there's all these variables that are actually in Trump's favor. But with that being said, the polls do say that they're in a dead heat. So with an election that's so allegedly close and tight, a debate like this, a vice presidential debate, becomes a lot more potentially changing the game. It can change the game, it seems like. So,
Yeah, well, listen. I mean, when you have states that are at a dead tie, right? I mean, if you can move the bar 1 point, I
right,
mean, right?
that's
We're
how
we're
it's going to be
talking we're
decided.
talking 80,000 votes, toward one party over the other. 1% does make a big world of difference. It changes it from a toss up into a tilt margin, and that can be very big for a party to gain 1% over the other,
That's right.
especially when you have like the last debate, which people felt like they got just a whole lot of nothing. It doesn't matter what side that you're on.
Yeah,
Perhaps maybe a lot of people are actually, well, I didn't get anything on that last debate. Let me at least check out this one.
I think that this is going to be a much more substantive debate. And speaking of substance, let's get into the substance. So, Tim Walz, for those that don't know, is the governor of Minnesota. And we are going to get into some of the positions and facts about Tim Walz. So, fact number one, Tim Walz has a history and relationship with China. Now, ordinarily, that wouldn't be a concern. I mean, China, you could visit China, you could appreciate the landscape, you could like the people. That's all fine. But Tim Walz has been visited back and forth to China at this point 30 times. He had his honeymoon there. He was a teacher over there, and he was teaching English, and all good things to say. But it was the way that he would gush about the people there and how they share. And Tim Walz is quoted having said, "One person's communism is another person's neighborliness." That is a quote from Tim Walz. Now, let's get into some of these. Let's get into some of these pictures. So go ahead and pull up China 1, because saints of God, it's not just me that is looking into Tim Walz's relationship with China. Because you might say, well, what's the big deal? He taught there. He appreciated the people there. He says he loves the culture there. But it's not just me. I mean, somebody who's seeking the highest office in the land, I think it's fair to look into things like this, and I'm not alone. So this article is courtesy of a website called Foreign Policy. That sounds neutral, right? So the title of this article was "Tim Walz has always been consistent on China." So as you can see here, it mentions not all attention to Walz's China record has been positive. And it talks about something that Senator Marco Rubio said. He accused Walz of being a, quote, China asset. And this article, which is supposed to be about foreign policy and, very apolitical, it says, but Rubio's attack has it precisely backwards. Walz's record is that of a measured critic of the Chinese Communist Party. Okay, he's a measured critic, according to foreignpolicy.com. And Walz is prone neither to exaggeration nor accommodation. And so, guys, according to foreignpolicy.com, Tim Walz is a measured critic. Now, how do we know he's a measured critic? Well, according to this article, it says, small-town Nebraska newspaper articles published well before Walz had any political ambitions demonstrate that his professed affection for the Chinese people and culture has been matched by a long-standing criticism of the country's rulers. Okay, so I don't particularly find this a convincing evidence. It just says small-town newspaper articles. Where's the articles? Where's this tough and measured criticism? So this is a big nothing burger. Go ahead and pull up the second picture. So here we go. This says here, during his teaching year, he visited Beijing, a 40-hour trip by rail, which I don't know why that's in parentheses to just mention, like, I guess, his dedication. And he saw Tiananmen Square. According to the record, as much as Walz loved the Chinese people and China, his attitude towards the Chinese Communist Party was bluntly critical. Well, we already know that apparently there were articles written in the past that we can't see that were saying that. But let's see if there's something here. Tiananmen Square, he told the record, quote, will always have a lot of bitter memories for the people. Okay, so effectively he just said the place where bad things happened is always going to give people bad feelings. This is not a sharp, blunt, critical attitude towards the Chinese Communist Party. So this whole article, Foreign Policy, and the person who wrote it, they claim that he is a tough critic on the Chinese Communist Party. That he's not really into the communist stuff, but it's clear that he loves the Chinese people. That's fine, but the actual Communist Party is not our friend. It will never be our friend. And it seems here that, I mean, at best, he's like super soft on China. He's super soft on their party because nothing in this article suggests that he is critical or blunt. So that's his relationship with China. A little suspect, but let's move on because something more suspect and more blunt is the radical abortion laws. So go ahead and
Yeah,
put up those.
sounds sussy.
Yeah, exactly. Uh, and this is even more so. So, saints of God, this says, and my record is so pro-choice. This is him talking about abortion. Tim Walz. And my record is so pro-choice. Nancy Pelosi asked me if I should tone it down. I stand with Planned Parenthood. Now, for those that don't know, Nancy Pelosi is as demonic as it can get on these policies. She is as pro-abortion as you could possibly be. I mean, like, she would have abortion factories. She likes abortion. I mean, it's like she loves it. She really loves it. She sings about it. And so this person who is very radical on these evil policies, he's saying, she's even telling me to calm down. And it's like something he's proud of as far as abortion goes. So January 2023, Tim Walz signed a bill declaring abortion a fundamental right in Minnesota that can be exercised without restrictions at all stages of pregnancy. In the state of the in his state of the speech, in his state of the state. What does that say? In his state of the state speech. That's a weird name for his speech. But he quote established an ironclad right to reproductive freedom, which
Right.
I mean, what is there really to say? And also, last year he successfully proposed abolishing state funding for pro-life pregnancy centers.
Yeah.
And that's
What
not
does
all.
that tell you? What does that tell you? That tells you that he's radical
Radically
for
anti
abortion. He's
living
radically
children.
anti pro-life.
Yep.
Yeah, it's crazy. Sorry.
And
Go.
no, it's okay. And on top of all that, recently he signed a law that ended the requirement of babies who survived abortion to be given life-saving medical care. So I want everybody out there to understand he signed a bill that ended the requirement for babies to have life-saving medical care if they survived the abortion. And if I'm remembering correctly, what they did was they changed the language to life-saving to just like medical care. So it doesn't have to be life-saving, but like as long as you like, I don't know, put like ointment and then just let the baby die. But the whole point is the restrictions are being removed, language is being changed so that it doesn't have to be life-saving. So that it gives even more weird power to kill children,
Right.
quite frankly.
Yeah, I mean, at beneath the surface of all of this is saying that he would much rather end the life of the baby than rather provide the resources to promote life of the baby.
Saints of God, this is the ticket of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. This is a radical, demonic ticket with regards to abortion. Now
Yeah,
let's go on to
yeah,
mischaracterization. Oh, go ahead. Sorry,
yeah.
sorry.
Really quick. Also, it's important to know. I don't know if it's going to be brought up, but also Tim Walz's ideologies and passing a bill to put tampons in the boys' bathrooms in public schools.
Go ahead and throw up the pictures
Tampon
we have
Tim.
for
Oh,
that.
did I jump ahead, bro? I'm
You
sorry.
jumped ahead, but hey, let's go. We're on the fly here. So, brother Alex, that's absolutely right. Tim Walz, who has been humorously named Tampon Tim, not for
Which
nothing.
rightfully, not just
I was about to say
humorously,
not for nothing.
rightfully so, he's dubbed his name is now dubbed Tampon Tim. We're not just saying that just to say it. We're saying it because this dude really promoted having tampons in boys' restrooms.
The Word of God says He made them male and female. But what Tim Walz wants to do is just put tampons everywhere to confuse children's from grades 4 to 12. Look at this. It says he did do it. He's requiring public schools to stock menstrual products in the restrooms for, quote, all menstruating students. I mean, it's like that language, like pregnant people. When it says pregnant people, it's so weird. I mean, it's in our, if you have an iPhone, it's in your emojis. There's like pregnant man emoji. It's crazy. I thought that's like when somebody was overeating, but no, it's a pregnant man
Yeah.
emoji. Uh, so yeah, and for grades 4 through 12. I mean, this is crazy. So yeah, so Tim Walz doesn't believe in the basic science of boys and girls. Let's move on. Mischaracterization of military service. So Tim Walz faithfully, I will say, served in the National Guard for 23 years.
Yeah, faithfully.
Um,
Well, I mean, we'll say he served faithfully in the military. We appreciate his service in the military. But Jonathan, what else?
Well, what else is, as much as we honor and salute the people that serve our country in the National Guard, as Tim Walz did serve in the National Guard, uh, what he has done though with his record is he has embellished it and been slippery in how he defined his record in order to gain higher authority, accolades, to pad out his record, you know, just to appear better than he really was. And quite frankly, when I saw this stuff, I'm like, why did you even need to do it? I mean, you had a great record. So, and what I'm talking about is the fact that Tim Walz has claimed that he has served in Afghanistan and seen war. He's actually said that he held weapons of war, when the fact of the matter is he's never been to Afghanistan. He has never held weapons in war, and it's all a fabrication. He did get deployed to Italy in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, which is the war in Afghanistan. But he did not, in fact, go to Afghanistan and face combat with his fellow soldiers. Now, if somebody had a hat and the hat said Afghanistan veteran, you would absolutely assume that he went to Afghanistan without a
100%.
doubt. So
100%.
essentially, he's wearing the hat, but the only thing, and again, I don't say only like it's not a good thing, or he did what he was supposed to do, that's fine. But to claim that you are a veteran of Afghanistan when you didn't go is crazy. And you don't have to take my word for it. All of the articles here show this embellishment. You can see it says he, let's see here, been there, done that. Walz might have said, not only is he a teacher, Walz is also a retired Command Sergeant Major in the National Guard who served a tour of duty in Operation Iraqi Freedom during his 24 years of military service. So where are these articles all getting the same idea? It's from him. It's the way he's framing it. He's claiming something that, as a service member, is a very dishonorable thing to do. I'm sure other military people don't like it. He says that, oh, it's public information, everybody knows. But clearly, look at these articles. The way that he's framing it and telling people, they clearly think what he's wanting them to think. And another thing that is an embellishment here with Tim Walz is that he retired as a Command Sergeant Major, because the fact of the matter is he did not retire as a Command Sergeant Major. He retired as a Sergeant Major. He was given Command Sergeant Major. He was given the ranking, but then in order to keep the ranking, you have to go through, you have to do some coursework, you have to do some different, you basically have to go through some different things. And the fact of the matter is, he did not. He retired 2 months after he was granted the ability to get that ranking, and then he retired as a sergeant major. So, saints of God, the point of saying all this is this is somebody who is lying about their military record in order to appear more authoritative. And yeah, just like Farmer Scott said, I'm glad I just caught that in the comments. Stolen valor. People would consider that to be stolen valor. It's such a dishonest thing to do as a military member.
It's like putting makeup on
Right.
his military career to make it look better, to make him look more patriotic, to make him look like he's some kind of a war hero
Right.
when he's never served in the war zone.
So
That's what JD Vance was that bringing up. JD Vance never attacked his service in the military.
Right.
What he went after was his stolen valor of saying he did X, Y, and Z when he never did X, Y, and Z.
Correct, correct. And I'm going to power through this. So, next thing is his failure during the George Floyd riots. Tim Walz absolutely catastrophically failed when the George Floyd riots were happening. Minnesota was on fire. It was a smoldering ash heap. A police precinct was burning. I'll go ahead and put up that. Yeah. So that's a picture of the police precinct that was burning while Tim Walz took 3 days to call the National Guard in when it should have been called right away. It was, and Tim Walz even admitted, you can see here that it was an abject failure in response to the rioters who burned the businesses. So this, and by the way, yes, Kevin Huller, a half-truth is still a lie. There's a fancy name for that. It's called an equivocation. But yes, absolutely true. But yeah, Tim Walz failed here. Abject failure. He even acknowledged it was a fail. He let the city burn. And guys, normally we don't bring family into the politics. That's kind of like unspoken rule. But his wife, we do have to bring this up. His wife spoke on the riots, and she said something really weird. Play that clip.
I could smell the burning tires. And that was a very real thing. And I kept the windows open for as long as I could because I felt like that was such a touchstone of what was happening.
Okay.
I could smell the burning tires.
She smelt the tires as long as she could, like she was, like it was lasagna being cooked in your kitchen.
Bro, this is the smell of people's businesses and livelihoods burning down. And she said, I kept the window open as long as I could so I could take it in. I mean, brother, that's so weird. They call the Republicans. That's weird. That
is weird, bro. That's really weird. Like, I don't know if you've ever smelled burning tires. They don't smell. It doesn't smell good.
So we got to power through this. We only have a few minutes.
Yep.
So, by the way, something really famous that he said, Tim Walz, is, in Minnesota, we mind our business. So go ahead and play that clip. Mind your own business.
In Minnesota, we respect our neighbors and their personal choices that they make. Even if we wouldn't make the same choice for ourselves, there's a golden rule. Mind your own damn business.
That's the golden rule?
Okay. Yeah, right. Wait a minute. We'll talk about that later. But, and apologies for the language. Now, please pull up the snitch hotline. So Tim Walz says, mind your own business. But in Tim Walz's state, in Minnesota, Mr. Mind Your Own Business had a hotline so you could snitch on your neighbor if they were out past COVID-19 curfew. So if you were sitting on your porch at like 6 p.m., the police would come by, and there's actually videos, Brother Alex, of people getting shot with paintballs. Like, get inside, like they get the flashlights because of his draconian COVID-19 lockdown. So Mr. Mind Your Own Business, yeah, he had a snitch hotline for your neighbor. So if you see a neighbor sneaking off to go have Thanksgiving dinner, you can report them through this hotline. And also, here's the quote. He says, I'd like to correct myself. I said communism. He says socialism. One person's socialism is another person's neighborliness, that's another weird thing to say, especially somebody who has such a relationship with China. Moving on. China. And so the last two things really quick. Ambition for higher office. I mean, Tim Walz actually used to be a centered politician. He actually used to be known as a kind of centrist guy. But when he saw opportunity for higher office, he totally dumped all whatever values, I guess, he had or beliefs, and he shifted to the left in order to gain power, essentially. So, yeah, this says here, everybody agrees that he's changed to a markedly more progressive. Last thing, $250 million fraud scandal. Tim Walz, in his mismanagement of Minnesota, there was a charity essentially that defrauded his state for $250 million. There was a lot of red flags. Apparently, it was like, if you just looked into it a little bit, you would notice. But his incompetence of his leadership and his administration allowed for them to be defrauded. And I think the charity claimed to be feeding children, and they were really like buying jewelry and buying a bunch of like expensive clothing. And he never took responsibility. Matter of fact, he actually blamed a judge that was handling the case, and then the judge had to come out and say, and essentially be like, bro, you're lying. That's not true. And then he didn't want to talk about it until he got subpoenaed. So he's being subpoenaed right now to talk about this. And Saints of God, again, this is just to show you the manager, because we're hiring somebody to manage our country. He's going to be the assistant manager. This is how he's managed his state. We only have like 1 minute to talk about J.D. Vance, so I'm going to try to get to what I can. So J.D. Vance, if you don't know, Hillbilly Elegy, great. I saw the movie. It's I want to read the book as well, but you know, J.D. Vance is like the opposite in all ways of Tim Walz. J.D. Vance, also this whole DEI thing, diversity, equity, inclusion. So J.D. Vance's story is an example that goes so far against the left's equity, because it shows how one can overcome adversity through hard work and resilience. In Kamala Harris and Tim Walz's equity world, Saints of God, where they're saying that everybody has to end up in the same place. Everybody has to end up in the same place. It doesn't matter how hard you work. It just matters about looking at minorities and making them have the same outcome, regardless of how hard they work or anything like that. And the idea is, well, it's not fair. I mean, if you start poor, you can never make it in America. But that's not true. We all know that's not true. And J.D. Vance's story is a living example of that. He came from a drug-riddled family. His mom was heavily on drugs. He was poor. I mean, his story is heart-wrenching. But what happened? He ended up going to an Ivy League college. He ended up being, rising in the political scene. And he did all that without any, it was all hard work. He didn't have any connections to the Ivy League college. He got in there through hard work and through overcoming that adversity. And, that's what we want in this country. We want to live in a place where anybody can make it, no matter where you're from, and that currently is the truth. So we gotta give respect to the anti-DEI narrative. He's on board, obviously, with President Trump and his border, and some of basically the strongest issues, free speech, and super strong on abortion. Matter of fact, I just want to mention this. His stances on abortion are so strong that they're like nails on a chalkboard when it comes to criticizing him. His stances on abortion, I've heard them come out. They go, he wants to stop abortion after 6 weeks with no exceptions for incest and rape, and I mean their faces when they describe his abortion stance. So he very, very, and obviously in a perfect world we'd have no abortion. We don't support it at all. But his stance for it is very, very strong. So I'm so sorry. That's all the time I had to cover JD.
You did good, brother. We did good. We'll get into it a little bit more. But for now, let's go ahead and transition to the presidential debate. And let me get the
meeting for the first time. I'm Margaret Brennan. In order to have a thoughtful and civil debate, these are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to. Questions will be directed at one candidate, who will have 2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal. Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute each at the discretion of the moderator.
Can everybody hear that?
If you guys can hear that,
drop us a one
between the
or a thumbs up in the comments.
Enforce the rules and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News reserves the right to mute the candidates' microphones to maintain decorum. We have not shared the questions or topics with the campaigns. The stage is set. Governor, Senator, thank you for joining us. Let's get started. Tonight, our country is facing several unfolding crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene. And now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago, a nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together, understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the Vice President said today we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same question. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me. And she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership. And when Iran shot down an American aircraft in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about what the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. Nora?
Margaret, thank you. Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane, because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today, actually, a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible, and then, of course, afterwards, to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job. And I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. Now, Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say, Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America, because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Governor Walz, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, we got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane, and my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship. They work together. So all of the governors and the emergency responders are on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there to that we recover. But we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, has created jobs all across the country. 2,000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward, that climate change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we start thinking about how do we mitigate these disasters.
Thank you. Senator, I want to give you an opportunity to respond there. The governor mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. And I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years.
Senator.
Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing
Senator,
worse by the climate.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look, we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil. But the folks know, and like I said again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our number one export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And thinking about how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future. How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that, and an all-above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora.
We're going to turn now to immigration. The crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border consistently ranks as one of the top issues for American voters. Senator Vance, your campaign is pledging to carry out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S. military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Governor, do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children?
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about this, about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history. 30% decrease in Ohio, but there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state and a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this, and that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up these
3 years
adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this. Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this. And he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years after he came down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling them what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children? even if their kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules, and it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, what about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this. And Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true. Don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Langford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Tim, Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris has been. And it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help. But most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico. You've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable, but it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it. And it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That
Thank
is
you,
the
Senator.
Facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Oh, they don't stop him, though.
The CBP One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created.
Oh, they shut off his mic now?
Let them have the conversation.
Can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process.
I want to get to their fact checks.
Nora.
Thank you, Margaret.
If
the
they're breaking the rules,
is a top concern for
goodness.
voters. Each of your campaigns has released an economic plan, so let's talk about the specifics. Governor Walz, Vice President Harris unveiled a plan that includes billions in tax credits for manufacturing, housing, and a renewed child tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that. Look, the $35 insulin is a good thing, but it costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more houses in Minneapolis, prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit, we have one in Minnesota, reduces childhood poverty by 1/3. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago, he said, you're rich as hell, I'm going to give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be destabilizing it, it would increase inflation and potentially lead to a recession. Look, this is simple for you. Where are we going? Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do. We'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that, our system works best, more people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan and
she's
says
going to give
it
him a
would
double
increase
question?
the nation's deficit
Let him
by
respond.
$5.8 trillion. My question is the same for you. How do you pay for all that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer, a lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do. And some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies. And what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%. Open the American southern border and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom, because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle class and working class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle class?
Yeah, well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one, whether it was the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, you made a question about experts, said this. I've made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years, and the last year as president? That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
You have a minute.
Governor, you say trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop, and we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
Well, if you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that, look, we produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics show that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here, because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you've simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on health care then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you. Margaret?
We have a lot to get to ahead, gentlemen, on many topics. But right now, I want to talk about personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice the president hears before making consequential decisions. We want to ask you about your leadership qualities.
Did he just say like?
I got to ask about.
You said you were in
Kamala
Hong
Harris's.
Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square
Is he like
protests in the
excited to get to
spring of
abortion? I think he is.
1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years.
We don't
and
need a
in
knucklehead
Congress,
vice
I was
president.
one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything. Many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID. And I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate, Donald Trump, unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out to messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States Senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular, Margaret, because Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax. Look, the one thing, and you're probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration, it's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Senator, your time is up. Nora?
Thank you. Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Governor Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says. But look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind.
What does it say?
Donald Trump put this all into motion.
Tell us what it says.
He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade.
Tell us what it
52 years
says.
of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing.
Tell us what it
Amanda
says.
Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care.
What about the other 99%?
Decided by the doctor. And that would have been
Diversion.
an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in
What about the other
Kentucky,
99% of abortion?
Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies. It's going to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to get contraception and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business, but those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about health care. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in health care for a reason. We trust women. We trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, let him just
certainly
respond to
we
the
won't.
claim.
And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, you know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance, had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject and you hear me talk about it, you hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did when I was running for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, you know, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making childcare more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible, because we've got to do a better job at that. And that's what real leadership is.
Governor, your response.
I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that, too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator?
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me. But as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think,
That's
whether
not
you're
true.
pro-choice or
That's not how the law
pro-abortion,
is.
that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
But
this,
how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, getting engaged, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education, they get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget, Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more of the CBS News vice presidential debate in just a moment.
Wow. Wow. I think we have like 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Dude, well, that's crazy. Just checking in to the chat. Babies are a blessing. Yes, amen. Abortion isn't healthcare, it's baffling. Yes, that's true. It's a language change. Brother, I have so many notes of some of the things that were said. What do you have to say here?
Yeah, so let's start with the abortion thing. Let's talk about Minnesota and their the way that they state that they have women's rights. Is there somewhere that we can go to fact check that policy really quick that you know of?
I mean, when you say fact check, I don't know.
No, like to look up
the actual bill, but it is confirmed that he did take that away. And
yeah. No, I'm just trying to look for.
I just don't know, other than pulling up the actual bill, how to properly, show that.
Okay.
But there's no. It's. Let me see. I was going to say it's like a fact. Nobody's denying it except when cameras are on. They'll say that it's not true, but
right.
No, it is in fact true.
And then a couple things that I had.
Yeah.
The very first question, Walz was asked, how does Israel have the right to defend itself? And he basically goes in with ad hominems by attacking Donald J. Trump's age, as though like, hello, you have a president that's older than Donald J. Trump,
older and
older
declined.
and more out of his mind.
I know.
So I don't even know why that would even hold up.
Yep.
But Vance actually stated that, and he actually answered the question. He said that Donald J. Trump, his history of his, the 4 years that he was in office, there were no new wars that were started under his administration. So he was able to answer that.
Yeah. Something that stood out to me is that he once again, like Joe Biden mentioned, when he was asked about climate change and stuff, he said, we passed the Inflation Reduction Act. And that was a really good thing. So there, effectively admitting that this Inflation Reduction Act was really filled with green energy stuff. Like, it was called inflation reduction, but it had like I think trillions of dollars for green energy, and really it was so basically admitting that what it was called didn't really reflect truly what it was. So I thought that was an interesting lie that was being perpetuated. I mean, the moderators, dude. The moderators are so bad. It's amazing that JD Vance fact-checked him. It's amazing that the moderators, when they ask questions, there was a couple times where she like said it in a weird way, like, Walz, what do you think about what he said? Like, and then when she would give it back to JD, she's like, what do you think about what Trump said? So these kinds of biases, I mean, it's so shameful to pretend like you are a nonpartisan, balanced, force. And I think that's for all legacy media. Everyone should just come out and be honest. But I think the problem with that is that you would have like 10 news stations that would have to declare that they're Democrat, and then there's just like Fox News as far as major outlets. So, there's much more I could say, but here we go. We're back.
We're back already. Okay.
It was a quick 4 minutes.
Welcome back to the CBS News vice presidential debate. We want to turn now to America's gun violence epidemic. The leading cause of death for children and teens in America is by firearms. Senator Vance, you oppose most gun legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including AR-15s. So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartel. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks. and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, and here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that worked. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go? When we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills. They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms, and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight, this breaks your heart.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's doing okay. Christ have mercy. It is awful. And I appreciate what Tim said, actually, about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly, weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Is, okay, first of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was an NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today. And several things I want to mention on this is talking about cities and where it's at. The number one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues, making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns, and there are things that you can do about it. But I do think that this is one, and I think this is a healthy conversation. I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. Let's turn now to the top contributor to inflation, the high cost of housing and rent. There's a shortage of more than 4 million homes in the United States, and that contributes to the high housing prices. Governor Walz, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. We have, first, let me say this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the Vice President is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back, and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens? If you lower energy prices, as Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill, one of the biggest drivers of housing costs aside from illegal immigration is, think about it, if a truck driver is paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods, too.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Can I have it?
Governor, we will get to you in a moment. But, Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens who deserve to be here.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, I do want to let you respond to the allegation that the vice president is
every time he says something, it's an allegation.
Of course, it's not true. And again, you have the facts. I guess we agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. That, look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's, again, blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask, though, on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, We protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like, there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor, your time is up. But Senator, on that point, I'd like for you to clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that in some cases, many of those are local. Many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. You're passionate about the housing crisis, I can tell. But Nora?
Thank you. One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. Look, it's very simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think this is an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done. But when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and health care costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do, but I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better health care policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept, because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would protect people with pre-existing conditions or laid out that plan.
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened, and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight, is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher. And he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works. And the question about this of young people or whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then what happens is...
So you think the individual mandate's a good idea?
You shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look, people know that they need to be on health care. People expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure then when you get sick and old, it's there for you. Because I heard people say, well, I don't want to buy into Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying health care once you get past 70. So look, the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you. Margaret?
Can I address that?
I apologize. We're out of time. We have a number of subjects to discuss. Margaret?
Let's talk about families in America. There is a child care crisis in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you've said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family and medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family and medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start, the family works better, we stay in their employers, we get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue, those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some places, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family and medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support a national paid leave program? And if so, for how long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who is an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company. But the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris.
He's endorsing J.D. Vance.
I mean, look, if you look at the federal programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of child care model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with child care. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide child care in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote child care because, look, it is unacceptable. And, you know, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options, like they're choosing between going to work or taking care for their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank you. You have also said, Senator Vance, many things about the American family. The Federal Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on child care as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this. President Trump recently said, as much as child care is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families. Cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, child care options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Can you clarify how that will solve the child care shortage?
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of the child care shortage is we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide child care options for American families, because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, your ticket also has some child care tax credit proposals. Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised? Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's $5,000 or $6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarships types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000 in the hole. That's one school. That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy's growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president. Donald Trump left the White House. And now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues. And that, to me, is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here. And I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator.
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this, and the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day. Some with the American flag, several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state capitol grounds in St. Paul and said, we're marching to the governor's residence and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter. People hear that. So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret?
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up. I just think for everyone tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance, I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement, but this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't wear masks.
Senator, the governor does have the floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to respond to you.
Yeah. Well,
he asked him a question.
I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is, where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office, even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that, because of course that's what we would do. So, America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time is up. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates. The CBS News vice presidential debate continues.
Okay. First, I want to bring up the abortion discussion that we were having before. I did find the legislation. Okay. So Tim Walz was accused by J.D. Vance of signing legislation into law that effectively reduced the care for infants that were born due to a botched abortion. And the legislation is part of Minnesota's 2995 Omnibus Bill, which made several significant changes related to abortion and newborn care. Previously, Minnesota law required, quote, reasonable measures to preserve the life and health of infants born alive after failed late-term abortions. However, with the new law signed by Governor Tim Walz in 2023, this requirement was altered. Instead of mandating life-saving efforts, the language was changed to require only, quote, care. So this is exactly what we were talking about. It is the 2995 Omnibus Bill. And yes, so the language changed from life-saving to just care. And again, that language change is intentional to further give people, doctors and their patients, the right to terminate life even after the baby's out of the womb.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. Obviously, it's one of the most wicked abortion bills that's out there. And, it just, those are the things that this country has to utterly reject and overturn. And that's how we rise up. We faith the nation. We preach the gospel to every creature, every person. And the hearts of the individuals change with the gospel. And then what do? They get filled with the Spirit. They get baptized. They get discipled. And then you go out and you faith the nation by affecting change in your local laws in your local communities by going to the ballot box and voting for the most, I guess you can say, either the policies that are going to help advance the gospel through advancing and keeping freedom of speech, freedom to assemble, everything that the country was founded on, the 10, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, and that's what we're called to do. We are the ones that are responsible for preaching the gospel, not politicians per se. Of course, it would be great if Joe Biden got born again. It would be great if Kamala Harris got born again. It would be great if Donald Trump got born again. If he's not, or if they're not. But obviously, we can't depend on them to be born again and preach the gospel. That commission has been given to us, and so we are looking for the best policies that are going to help us bring us that ability to do so.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah. So one of the things they brought up around this time was the gun laws, gun violence. And Vance said gun violence was committed with illegally bought guns, and he talked about adding security. Walz said that he wanted to enhance red flag laws, and he also mentioned red flag laws would be something like where just basically more restrictions, right? So you put more restrictions on things, and you're basically taking away your right to
slowly.
To have a firearm. He also brought up Finland, how Finland owns guns. I fact-checked him. Fact-checked, it said that only 12% of Finland's own firearms, I see the debate coming on, only 12% of Finland's own firearms, and their rate is also down, but it's only 12%. So it wasn't the whole, like it was a whole nation.
You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Senator Vance. Thank you to CBS News. And most importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything, but they are truly optimistic people. They believe in a positive future of this country, and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you, that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something. Not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage, and then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class, and she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator Vance, your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl. And that, too, has gotten harder with because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you. And thank you both for participating in the only vice presidential debate of this election cycle. I'm Margaret Brennan.
And I'm Nora O'Donnell. And a reminder, there are just 35 days until Election Day. Please get out and vote. And for all of us here at CBS News, thank you and good night.
It'd be funny if they were like, I am Nora O'Donnell, and I'm mad because I didn't get the fact check a little bit more.
Yeah. All right. So that's it for the debate. So tell us who got cooked in this session. Who do you guys think got cooked? I want to hear from everybody watching. Let us know if you think Vance got cooked. Type in Vance. If you think Walz got cooked, type in Walz. That's what we're going with. Go ahead, Brother John.
I'm typing Walz, bro. I mean, I can't type, but I'm just gonna say it. Walz, he got cooked. JD Vance put on the MAGA hat. He chefed him up. He put some beautiful spices that probably came from exotic locations. He got like the black lava salt. You ever seen that salt, brother? They got like black lava. It's like black and it's all fancy. Yeah, I think he got cooked amazingly. He was seasoned. He was cooked. And man, he really wanted, it's so incredible because he was getting so cooked, and where he hung his hat, brother, I think this is very telling. He hung his hat. I'm surprised. Not even on abortion. Not even on abortion. He hung his hat on January 6th.
Yeah, dude. I don't even know why they keep on bringing that up, man. But
for everybody watching out there, when that is the focus, when that is the most important thing that you can bring up, you're falling flat on your face. You're floundering. You're losing. You're grasping for dear life, because all of the topics they talked about. Wow. I mean, I'm not saying like it was 100%. Like there was not any points made on Tim Walz's side that were decent. Definitely none decent when it comes to abortion and many things. But all I'm saying is he got cooked. He got cooked. And he hung his hat on January 6th and really went hard. It seemed like he really wanted to stay there, really wanted to grind out the airtime to make sure, like, hey, I am pummeling. I think he got wrecked when JD called it. I don't remember exactly, to be honest. The moment that I said was awkward. That was a weird moment. He looked very uncomfortable, and I think that was a clock. I think he got clocked in that, in more than once, but in that moment particularly, I don't remember what was being said, but I remember it happened.
I like the part where he actually endorsed JD Vance.
Yeah, right. He was like writing things down.
He was like, oh yeah, that's good. He was looking over at him, and somebody in the comments said that Walz's family already endorsed Donald Trump. Well, now we got Walz that just endorsed Donald Trump. I'll try to get a clip of that. I'm sure there'll be clips of that going around. But all in all, I felt like it was a very productive debate. I think obviously Walz did get cooked. You know, the policies were there. He did exactly what I was hoping Donald Trump would have done, was basically after every question, just throw it back on, well, Kamala Harris, you've been there for 3 years, 4 years, 1,400 days. Why haven't you done it yet? You know, and then go into answering the question and saying, well, this is what I'm going to do when we get in office. You know, JD Vance did a really good job of doing that repetitively
Did a
throughout
great
the
job.
debate, and then just reassuring it right there back at the end and saying, well, she's been in office this long. What is she waiting for? She's been there, she's been there, she's been there. What are you waiting for? Get to work. But they're not doing it.
They're not doing it, and they didn't do it for the. I find it absolutely incredible that also something that is astonishing to me, brother Alex, is the fact that when they talk about immigration, they bring up a bill that was just proposed recently, and we could talk about that bill. It's stuffed with a bunch of garbage, just like the Inflation Reduction Act was, but this bill was proposed 3 years into their into their presidency. Three, probably I think three and some change.
Are you talking about the border
The
bill?
They call it the border security. They name all these bills, these things that sound really great, but then they're filled with stuff that's like, other stuff. That's just politicking, I guess. But the fact that this bill was proposed 3 years into their and they keep saying, we did something about the border. No, you waited until the very last minute and then tried to do something. And really, that something that they were doing was very similar to the Inflation Reduction Act, which Joe Biden admitted was really just a bill for green policy. So yes, that bill had it because they had to have some border stuff in it, or else it wouldn't even be able to be entertained. But I just think it's so funny how the big thing is when it comes to them answering why they failed on immigration is Donald Trump didn't endorse our border bill that we decided to pass 3 years into our 4-year-long presidency.
Right. And, here's the thing about that border bill. When Donald Trump was in office, he didn't need a bill.
Right.
Mic drop.
Yeah.
He didn't need a bill. Why do you need a bill? Why do you need some kind? You know what I'm saying? Bam, 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 shots fired. Why do you need a bill? Donald Trump didn't need a bill. He just enacted the military. Here, just go do it. Right? Just go start building this wall. Governor Walz. His own name is Walz, and yet he doesn't support a wall. Like, hello. I don't know if that's why Kamala Harris decided to get Governor Walz to think that she's going to build a wall. I don't know what's going on here, man.
Going on. But real quick to talk about you making Walz jokes. I saw a joke that was like, Sir J.D. Vance, please tonight tear down this walls. Which is absolutely brilliant.
It's a Reagan quote.
That was whoever thought of that, like comedic. That's some comedic genius right there. I hope that was a real because it was in a comment, brother. But that was gold.
Yeah.
Sir J.D. Vance, tear down this walls. So to talk a little bit about, because when I gotta admit to the folks out there, when we were in the first commercial, I was going so fast. Like we were trying to, man, we gotta figure out a different way to get in our discussions during 4-minute commercials between two people. But yeah, just like you said, brother, from out the gate, the comment about him being old when currently Joe Biden is like disintegrating in front of our eyes, physically and mentally. It's pretty ironic, especially since he should get 25 amendmented, and Kamala Harris should do that. So, yeah, I agree with you there. He talked about, J.D. Vance mentioned how Iran got $100 billion under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's leadership. It's true. The Afghanistan pullout left $100 billion worth of equipment to terrorists, effectively. And yeah, he mentioned in the Middle East, Donald Trump did have effective deterrence. And it's so funny, this campaign and their relationship with masculinity it's funny because I think this campaign's relationship with masculinity is toxic, as opposed to the thing they're trying to fight against, which they say is toxic masculinity. Anyways, when he said the comment about Trump, people, JD, I'll agree with you. People are scared of Trump, but they're the people in this country. I just find that really funny, because Trump was a very effective at deterring killers and really smart and crafty world leaders. Not saying perfect. I'm just saying the difference is very stark. And one of the ways you can see that is how Iran hacked J.D. Vance. I don't know if it was his email, but they hacked some information from him, and they wanted to give it to the Biden-Harris campaign in order to strengthen their chances of winning the election. They don't want Donald Trump elected. So I thought it was interesting how Walz mentioned that Trump pulled Iran's nuke program and didn't replace it with anything else. In the words of Donald Trump, Iran was broke. Donald Trump effectively took away their money capabilities, and so the idea that he took away a plan and then left nothing there is false. So fact check there. He said the steady leadership of Kamala Harris helped repel the missiles that have been coming. No, the thing that repelled the missiles was the United States military that was assisting Israel. It wasn't Kamala Harris. And if it were up to her and her pro-terrorist cadre of people, there wouldn't be any help for Israel. I mean, if it was up to the Bernie Sanders of the world, I mean, these people say, we don't want another cent going to Israel, give it all to Ukraine. So that's I found that to be kind of rich. Well, what did you think about that?
Yeah, so I just want to say, in regards to Israel, I think we have to be definitely somebody who is for taking out terrorism in the Middle East with aiding Israel, okay? Because, the very fundamentals to the Islamic regime, Iran, death to America, death to Israel. Yes. Once they're done with Israel, where do we think they're coming from? Or where do we think that they're going to go? They're going to come to us. In fact, they're already trying to send people in through the southern border, which is why, again, the border crisis is such a crisis, and why we need to get a wall, or big wall, a lot of walls. And I'm not talking about tampon Tim walls, right? We're talking about
walls.
Real border wall. This whole thing with, how Trump handled Iran, he made them go broke. He forced China not to stop buying oil from Iran by putting a tariff on China. So China said, well, I don't want you to do that. So they stopped buying oil from Iran, and that caused Iran to go broke. They were literally broke, and so they couldn't fund Hamas, they couldn't fund Hezbollah, they couldn't fund these other terrorist organizations that are on the border of Israel, and so it did keep peace through strength. And that was Trump's policy. Trump was the one who said, I'm going to start just taxing people and these countries, and basically using money as a leverage. And guess what? It worked. So, the smart thing to do would have been for Biden just to continue with Trump's policies, and we probably would have been there. But, obviously Biden can't.
He can't. But what he can do, apparently, that Donald Trump is apparently unable to do, is admit that climate change is real. I thought it was funny how Tim Walz said that climate change is real. You know, I mean, look, no, yes, there is science that says the Earth is very, very slowly over little increments of time. It's warming. Absolutely, yeah, of course. That's never been the true argument. Is the Earth warming at all? The argument is how much of it has to do with what we're doing. And there is a lot of debate, and ultimately, they don't really know. They don't really know. It's a lot of guessing when it comes to that stuff. But anyways, I just thought it was funny how he said climate change is real, like kind of reinforcing the stereotype that Republicans don't believe in climate change or don't believe that it's happening. But I think one of our viewers very astutely pointed out that it's not about the fact that the world may be slightly warming, and I don't mean to say maybe. It's not the fact that the world is slightly warming over time, but it's the fact that the rhetoric, or it is the rhetoric that is being used, like, hey, this is the biggest thing that's happening, and it's going to destroy us. What that little girl that they send out everywhere to go, how dare you, and what's her name? Now she's like, I remember she was like a kid and you couldn't like say anything about her, but now she's an adult.
Oh, Greta Thunberg.
Greta Thunberg. So, I mean, but anyways, I don't want to.
Well, can I give a Bible verse about global warming really quick? What I believe the Bible says about it.
That's a lot better than my jokes about Greta Thunberg.
No, that's okay. So Genesis chapter 8, verse 22, it says, "While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, and day and night shall not cease." It's not going to stop. We're going to have cold periods. We're going to have heat periods. We're going to have times for harvest, times for sowing seed. We're going to have day and night. As long as the earth remains, if there's an earth, we're going to continue to have this. We have God's word on it. This is God's promise. And so who are we going to believe? Are we going to believe the world? Are we going to believe scientists that know it all? Or are we going to believe the word of God? Right? And so our job, we are to trust in the Lord. This is why I would utterly reject global warming as a quote unquote real thing in the view how they view global warming.
That it's an existential threat to
Yeah,
humanity.
because number one, look, we've only been keeping record of how cold it's been for maybe 100 years, if that. Right? We've been keeping track of cold and heat. How do we know how it was 700 years ago? There's no record of it. There was no record of how to gauge whether it was hot, whether it was cold, whether there was a trend going up or trend going down. I mean, nobody knows. We don't. There's just no record of it. And so, what are we basing this global warming on? We're basing it off of the past. Maybe accurately 60, 70 years. And so we're trying to make an assumption that the earth is, it was this way once and now it's getting worse when there's just no record of it. And
yeah, and I think that Jesus is the Lord of glory, which, by the way, amen, hallelujah. It says it quite well, because they're basing it off of bad science, but also off of bad faith, because it's really a faith. I mean, when you get down to it, the just like you're talking about, brother, the data isn't actually there to support the radical claims of the existential crisis that is supposedly the impending doom that supposedly awaits us with this. Again, not to say that we shouldn't work towards improving our methods of our forms of energy that we have. Like, I'm down to see what people can come up with, but there's things that clearly haven't worked, and this whole carbon footprint thing. There's a lot of bad science with that as well, and it seems like there's just something about this where people will just take it and run with it without having any kind of substantial reason, really. It just sounds, it's like an emotionally compelling argument, I think, to just say, don't you care about the world? Like, we got to do something about it. And I think it's the same with the abortion debate. You know, when they talked about abortion, how incredible is it? Just like how he hung his hat on January 6th, he also, a hill that he died on, which I find amazing, is the exceptions. He died on the hill of exceptions when it comes to abortion. What I would have loved to hear from J.D. Vance, I mean, I feel like I couldn't ask any more, because he really did deliver as far as you know, giving a great account of himself. I think of Donald Trump, and really of this ticket together. But man, I would have loved to have asked Tim Walz. So if I can agree to all of your demands as it pertains to what we call the exceptions, which as Christians we don't accept. We don't accept the rape and the incest as reasons to kill innocent life. But I would have loved to ask him, hey, so if we concede to all of your exceptions, what about the other 99%? Do you support putting restrictions? Will you walk lock in step with me to discourage people from getting abortions because they're poor, because they think that global warming is going to kill their children? These are real things that have been reported, that people have these concerns, and therefore an innocent life should be taken.
Right. No, that's a good point, because it'll call them out on their hypocrisy, number one, because they'll have to backtrack. They'll say, well, they'll probably say something to the effect of like, well, I'm not a medical physician, because that's going to be between the health of the individual and the medical physician or the medical employee, which we went over the verbiage of these things, and some say healthcare provider, some say medical physician, or a medical personnel. So it becomes very vague, because now it's no longer really a doctor that is determining whether the woman is fit to have this child, or this and that. So obviously it would call him out on his hypocrisy. They wouldn't agree to that. They'll say something like that.
Yeah. I also love when they were talking, to go back to the climate for just a second, when the hosts tonight were so, they tried hard, but I think, praise the Lord, because we live in a time of just the internet. So it's so clear when something just happens. Like we have all the recordings, we have all the screenshots. It's much easier to catch things because of the technology we have now, and the attempt to even paint this as a moderately moderated debate is really something that's shocking to me, because it was not. It clearly was not. And if it wasn't for J.D. Vance's competence, this could have been a different story for him. I do recall when she asked him in an adversarial way, is climate change? She's like, Donald Trump, like Tim Walz had said something, and it was time for J.D. Vance to respond. But instead of letting J.D. Vance to respond, they did this thing where they would ask him, instead of just saying, what's your response, they would just ask him like another question, like that's within the sphere, like something they'd want to ask him, and then he'd have to respond and also answer their question. She's like, so Trump said it's a hoax. She's like, do you believe that? And they couldn't. It was amazing to see them try to hide it.
Yeah, I've got this clip pulled up from the debate where J.D. Vance calls them out on their fact checking him, and they're breaking their own rules. So let's take a look at this really quick.
Incredible.
Yeah, give me 1 second. And
status. Nora?
Thank you.
Senator, we have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important
We're
because
going to turn now to the
debate-
economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the rules were that
The
you guys
economy,
weren't going to
we're-
fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on.
Nora?
Ma'am.
Senator, we have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important
We're
because
going to turn now to the
debate-
economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the rules were that
The
you guys
economy,
weren't going to
we're-
fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on.
Oh, they didn't like that one.
That is.
Oh man,
I mean-
man. Yeah, I didn't see the rules. I didn't hear about the rules.
They did say that there would be that would be up to the.
But obviously, he fact checked
Constituent.
them on their own rules, and
Yeah, right.
I think that's a classic move. I think that one's definitely going to be a viral, talking point that
100%.
JD Vance fact checks CBS on their own rules that they broke on fact checking.
Yeah, and I also found it quite humorous that there were many exchanges where the moderator would ask Tim Walz, like, "Would you like to respond to those allegations?" And then when it was JD Vance, or excuse me, when it was Tim Walz's turn to talk, he talked about Trump dehumanizing people as it pertains to when he first became a presidential candidate, when he was running for the first time. When they said he was racist for what he said about Mexicans, and so Tim Walz was like, he dehumanized people. And then when it was JD Vance's turn, instead of the moderators going, JD, would you like to respond to those allegations? They didn't say that. And why? Because they're trying to support one side here, clearly.
They're totally lobbing it up, and like when Walz didn't have a good answer, they would come in and they would basically try to help Tim Walz out and ask JD Vance a question and really trying to like finish what Tampon Tim was saying. But I've got this next clip pulled up. Let's take a look because this one's actually very interesting. I didn't catch this part, but apparently, obviously, I think this is probably a mistake on Tim Walz's part. But check out what Tim Walz said when they started talking about the shootings and the shootings of at schools.
I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA. I've become friends with school shooters.
Man.
That's probably one of the most grave misspeakings of the night, I think.
Bro, like what? Like you become friends with them?
Yeah, I don't think he realized what he said there.
Yeah, I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah,
Look, I've been in debates, and I've said things that I didn't really mean, and maybe I didn't catch it, and I just misspoke, and this is definitely a big goof.
I think he meant to say that he become friends with the victims of families of school shooters, because part of that context of that was he was like, they're like, why did you change your rule or your opinion on guns? And he was like, well, I got to know,
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault.
So I think it was in that
Weapons
context,
ban, but it's only later in
misspoke, and that is a really unfortunate way to miss.
Sorry about that. I was looking at, I'm just kind of looking at some of these clips, man. Because
no, it's okay, man. Oh, I'm sure they're flying out of the hot press. One of the clips I think that's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
One of the clips I think will be amazing is that Walz did not answer the question about deportation, and he pivoted to they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. That's what he did. They asked him, "What do you think about deportation?" And he was like, "They're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. Eat the cats, eat the cats." Like he went right into, he did the whole routine, like the TikTok dance. But no, effectively he did pivot in that moment. He didn't answer the question about deportation. So, and I also find it very, very surprising that they continued to use the language migrants, even though JD Vance clarified illegal. He's saying, hey, listen, we gotta prioritize Americans over illegal immigrants. And they're like, well, what's wrong with immigrants? And they're like, hey, well, what's the deal with immigrants? And they just keep using that term, hoping that people will forget that JD said illegal immigrants, which they shouldn't be here in the first place. Also, one more thing about immigration, brother, this I noticed this, and for the viewers out there, when they brought up immigration, the first thing they brought up, and this tells you everything you need to know about CBS and, as far as these news stations that are supposed to be balanced. They're supposed to be, nobody's perfect, but they're supposed to be balanced.
They're supposed to be neutral. They're supposed to be just giving us and reporting the news.
Listen to how they framed it. And guys, this is so slippery. This is snake stuff. They said the first thing they brought up with immigration, and JD Vance properly retorted this by mentioning criminals, but they said, so let's talk about immigration. JD Vance, do you want to tear children away from their families? That was what they said, which is so incredible because I think the American people and I think our brothers and sisters can see that tearing people away from their families, that is not the conversation. The conversation has been about the crime, the absolute crime, and the absolute disdain for the rule of law here as it pertains to coming in. That has been so disrespected, and there's actually people on the left that are encouraging people to come. There's different groups that actually help you come. They help you get plugged into resources to make sure you can come over illegally. And so I thought the framing of that question was so shocking and dishonest because it framed it in a way to put JD Vance at a disadvantage, which again, obviously tearing the people away from families, that's the emotional exception argument. That's the abortion, let's bring up abortion, so let's talk about incest and, grape. So what do you think about that, brother? Did you notice that they framed it, they brought up the emotional, JD, are you going to tear families away?
The whole campaign is being ran based on emotions. It's an identity campaign. It's about the person's identity rather than the person's policies in which they endorse or support. It's about who I am, and you got to vote for me. It's about joy. It's about emotions and stirring up emotions. They did that. They race baited Donald Trump. Why? Because they're race baiting an emotional response, right? Because if they can generate emotional response, it's I feel sorry, or I side with them because of my emotions are being stirred up. It has nothing to do with policy. It has everything to do with manipulation, which is actually witchcraft. Actually, if we really want to get down to it, it's witchcraft at its finest. It's manipulation. It's emotional. It's all about pandering for votes, all based off of emotions. And so I just want to also just really quick, bam, for our first. Right, Crystal P on the first super chat of the night.
Thank
we appreciate
Crystal
every
P.
dollar, every
Appreciate
penny. We
you.
appreciate you guys.
Thank you so much.
Also want to just give a shout out to all those that are supporting Faith the Nation with your monthly donations. We appreciate it very, very much. Any amount is greatly appreciated. It helps us to get equipment. We want to get microphones so we can sound better. So I need all the help I can get to sound better. I need all the help I can get. But her question is, thoughts on inflation due to price gouging? Well, that was Kamala Harris's number one thing, was she wanted to get rid of price gouging. And she talked about putting limits on prices. She talked about basically the price gouging at the grocery store. But the grocery stores, it's actually known that the grocery stores make very, very little percentage.
Tight margins.
Like we're talking about like 1 or 2, maybe 3% on every purchase is going to go to the store. So almost every single dollar is going to the actual product, actually coming into the store, staying in the store, refrigerating the food, making sure that it's not going bad, making sure that they're doing everything they can to give it maximum shelf life so that we can eat fresh foods. All that money that we're paying is going into the food, and very little of it. And then, of course, if they have employees, well, it's got to go to the employees, and so on and so forth. So grocery stores make very little money. They're not price gouging. If they put in a policy that's going to quote unquote put price caps on food, you know what's going to happen very quickly? We're going to turn into Cuba.
Right. And
we're going to turn into Cuba. I'll just finish this thought. We're going to turn to Cuba. There's going to be massive food shortages because if the farmers aren't making any money, why are they going to send food? So we're going to see food shortages like we've never seen before. Like you've never seen before. It's going to be the worst in history. That's my best Donald Trump voice. But anyways, yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's a communist policy to suggest artificially controlling the price for these retailers for food, and it's actually so bad that Democrats have condemned this policy. They've said it's ridiculous. I have a quote here from former Obama chief economist Jason Furman saying that Democrat-backed bills aimed at combating quote-unquote price gouging would not actually solve inflation, but might make future shortages worse. He talks about how the best solution for high prices is really competition. It's other high prices. Eventually, it's supply and demand. I mean, if demand is high and prices are up, the market will stabilize itself. And the idea that these restaurants that are running on tight margins, just like you say, are artificially price gouging is ridiculous. And putting artificial control on these economic situations will effectively cause more shortages, and it will cause a loss of labor too, because now you're forcing these companies to make financial decisions based on the prices that you're making them sell, the prices that are being imposed on them. So now their bottom line is it's crazier. Their margins are even crazier, and you're probably going to lose a lot of people, and it cause a lot more trouble. So that's my take on the price gouging.
Yeah, thank you for that, brother. Yeah, price gouging, it's for the birds. It's for socialists. It's for communists. That's what communists do. We need to have free market. Lower the price of fuel, lower the price of energy. That's how prices are going to get lowered, if at all. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes nowadays, I mean, I don't know if prices ever go down, ever. The best thing that we can do is really just lower the cost of energy. That helps. If they can lower the cost of your eggs, of your milk, it's the best chance is by cutting the cost of the fuel to get to the market, to get to the store. That's going to be the best way to do it. So, who supports that? Who's advocating for that?
Yeah, I mean, one person's advocating for artificial price controls, and the other isn't. That artificial price controls never worked, and it was tried out in communist regimes. Another thing that I got to bring up, just for a little bit of lightheartedness, is to continue to just rail on the moderators. At one point, they said voters trust Trump more on the economy, and they were talking to Tim Walz, and she said, "Why?" The way she said, so for all those watching out there, she was supposed to say, "Voters say they trust Trump more on the economy. Why do you think that is?" But she couldn't help it, and she had to go, "Voters say they trust Trump more on the economy. Why?" Like, why?
Yeah.
Why, Tim Walz? Help me. So I'm sorry.
That's okay, brother.
Had to get that bit out there.
Yeah. I want to touch really quick on Lou asked the question. I like this question because number one, he says, would like to see you gentlemen go in on Trump rallies as we ramp this last month. And I would say, man, look, we would love, 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 love to do more things like that for you guys, to bring you guys quality things, but it takes your support, right? If you guys are enjoying this stuff, we want to do stuff like that. You know what? In fact, there's on October 10th coming up, I just found out there is a conference in Orlando, Florida. It was always conferences here in Orlando, Florida. In fact, let me just plug for the Orlando CFM conference in Orlando, November the 22nd to the 24th. You don't want to miss it. Come to the CFM Restoration Conference. Register. Go to cfmchristforgiveness.com. Register. We want to see you guys there. We would love to have you guys. It is open for all. It's going to be a great time. Pastor David's going to be there. We got Holy Cabana coming. We've got God Logic coming in. He's going to cook chef. He's going to chef it up on some Muslim apologetics. So it's going to be hot. Look, you guys don't want to miss that. So I just want to let you guys know about that. But there's a bunch of conferences here all the time. But there's actually going to be a little conference here. It's going to have some big names. Donald Trump Jr. is going to be here. Also, it's going to be RFK Jr. is also going to be here. And I heard it on the radio, and I was like, yo, what if I can make it to that? Right? What if I can make it to those types of things, and then we can do like a plug. We can do a little bit of recording, right? We can do see if we can get a little interview with our little road mic. Hey, can you give us some questions? Can we ask you some questions, things like that? We would absolutely love to do that stuff, but we just need your help, right? We need you guys' help. Whatever the Lord puts on your heart. If you guys are liking these videos. And look, we're just in the political season right now. Okay. So a lot of the stuff that we're covering is politics because we're in the political season. There's a lot going on right now in the season with the two assassination attempts, with, Biden dropping out, with everything that's been going on. So we are focusing a lot on this, but this Faith the Nation, we have a vision of it being more of news, current events, politics, and putting our biblical eyes on these things and bringing it to you guys so you guys can see, how should Christians look at all these things? How should we prepare? How should we view in the spirit, about all these things that are coming in? So if you guys are liking this material, we really need your help, so any monthly donation, whatever you get at Dunkin' Donuts, if that's $5, nowadays $7 for a latte, if you can donate something like that to us monthly, all that stuff, every dollar really does help us a lot. We have a link in the description below, so you can go down there, give us your monthly support. And more of those things we're going to be able to do, right? And we're going to be able to do with quality. We're going to be able to do with good sound, with good cameras, good lighting. And we really want to bring this, to life for you guys. And we would love to go to these things, go to rallies. I would love to send Brother Jonathan or myself to the inauguration, see, those are types of things, right? But at the end of the day, and everything just costs money. And, but whatever, in the Lord's timing, right? And definitely pray for us. Pray that, God will open up the doors for provision. So we definitely need your prayers as well.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Pray for us. Pray for the nation. Pray for your leaders. Pray that that we could be the intercession, just like the prophet in the Word of God was intercession for a town that was filled with wicked people. But he said, Lord, what if there's even one? What if there's even a couple of righteous people? Can you spare it? And he said, yes. And, I know that revelation will happen. I'm not trying to stop that from happening. But
Sure.
I do feel that it's okay to pray and say, Lord, please heal this land right now. Please heal this nation. Please accept our humility, Lord, on behalf of those that are not and that are really exalting themselves in pride. Literally, that movement of the alphabet community, it's literally called pride. We can pray and pray and intercede on behalf of our country. Pray for our leaders to be born again. I saw some people mentioning that. And yeah, like Brother Alex said, pray for us because we do want to cover what's going on around us and put that spirit-filled lens on top.
Amen. All right, Crystal P. Thank you so much. She has a super chat. Thank you for that. She says, thoughts on Vance about Trump not accepting election. Well, here's the thing. I mean, I think Vance was just doing the politician thing, right? Answering in a way where
He was doing the Cupid shuffle.
he's basically just maybe slightly answering the question, but then still leaving enough room there where he's not dissing Trump. But that was totally a setup, right? That was a setup by CBS. Okay, that was a setup by CBS to try to get JD Vance to diss or basically diss his running mate, diss the president, possibly the next future president of the United States, and then make it a viral thing, right? And so I think JD Vance did a good job of not really biting into that piece of pie that they try to feed him. But at the same time, I mean, he can disagree on things, and I think he showed that. He said, we can disagree on some things here and there, slight things, and still, be running mates and still be partners. And I think that's really what democracy is really about. Is maybe we don't agree on everything, but as long as the fundamentals are there, and you know what? And I would even say that's how Christians should be. We as Christians, we get so caught up on little nuances of doctrine and, pre-trib versus post. Oh, you're pre-trib. I can't.
How wide is heaven's gates?
Yeah, oh, you're not saved. You're post-trib. Oh, you don't believe in the blessed hope, and oh, you're not a believer. And like, we're just so quick to just, disband fellowship, and that's not a brother anymore. When we're children of God and we're talking about minors things, right? And we need to focus on the majors, not the minors. And so, that goes along the lines of even within politics, or even when we're talking about things of this nation. Look, we're fellow Americans. We should be able to discuss our differences, at the table. Bring them out. Let's see which one prevails. Let's see which one works best for the people. Let's see which one the people actually prefer the most. Let's all bring it out to the table. But at the end of the day, we're still Americans, right? And it's the same thing. Okay, I don't agree with you on, this doctrine or that doctrine. But guess what? That's minor. You're still my brother in Christ. I still love you. I still extend out the right hand of fellowship. And so I think that's really the main takeaway from that. That's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you, brother. That was really insightful. And thank you, Crystal P, for your donation. My thoughts about Trump, about Vance and about Trump not accepting the election. When they asked him that question, I think that just like Brother Alex said, that he answered the question in a roundabout way. He didn't answer it directly, and there's a reason for that. Because there's a whole bunch of things you'd have to bring up to talk about how that election was stolen. Apart from the weird stuff that was going on in the different states, with their voting machines, with the votes being counted late, with votes showing up late at night. The censorship that went on when Hunter Biden's laptop was discovered when that was close to the election, and the government effectively told Twitter that, and they knew that this was a lie. They told Twitter that Russian disinformation was running rampant, and they purposely told them that so that Twitter would censor anything, really any kind of big news, because they would be scared to put out. So the government put a lot of pressure to censor that story, to affect the outcome of the election, and that's just one of the several things that was done to really steal the election, right? But that term, I think people are looking for, when they bring it up in the debate, they want J.D. Vance, or they want Trump to substantiate this claim by saying, we have evidence and it happened on voting day. Like, yeah, there was inappropriate things, I think, that happened on voting day, but there was also censorship and other things as well. I don't. We could talk about it another time a little more deeply, but I will mention, I will say that the laptop story was a very notable censorship that who knows what would have happened, but we do know that it would have negatively affected the president's chances of getting elected, and they effectively censored information for the American people to not be able to make informed choices. So all that to say, I think it's a complicated question, and they're looking for like a one kind of answer, and there's not really a good way to answer that question, because if you don't provide the evidence right there and say, well, it was in North Carolina, we proved it, it's not exactly like that. So I think it's a great gotcha question.
Yeah, amen. Well, final thoughts, Brother Jonathan?
Thank you, everybody. We have 35 people in here. Thank you so much for joining us today on Faith the Nation. This was a long stream, 3 hours and 30 minutes. You for those that have been there from the beginning, we salute you. We appreciate you. And, hopefully your brothers and sisters in Christ, if you're not, Jesus Christ loved you. He died for you. And if you repent and put your faith in Jesus Christ, you can be saved. He can deliver you, and you can experience breakthrough and be connected to the highest source of love in this world, Jesus Christ. So thanks guys.
Amen. And, just to, piggyback off of what you said, Jonathan, and for those watching, look, this show is called Faith the Nation, and how we came up with the title of the show is, number one, we change the hearts of men by preaching the gospel. That's number one. Okay, that's always going to be the main focus, is to change lives through the power of the gospel. But after that, what happens when people get saved? They get filled with the Holy Spirit, get baptized in the name of Jesus Christ, and they get discipled. Right? They get discipled. Why? So they can go out and make more disciples. But guess what? It doesn't just end there. We have the real responsibility in this nation to not just preach the gospel, but to go out and make a change within our own communities. We change the hearts of men through the gospel, but we change the way our communities function through policies, through your voting. And so it's time for us, after you get saved, after you repent, after you believe the gospel, after you get discipled, then it's time to rise up and faith the nation. God bless you guys. Love you guys. And until then, we'll see you guys on the next.